Hello guys, Joker the Fool here, back at it again with another video about the Rippaverse. Now, the Rippaverse is the independent comic book company that blasted onto the scene with the release of Isom 2 back in 2022. And since then, they have released a ton of books. There's 17 books in total that you can buy and get right now as of December 2025. And with all of that content that currently exists, and all the content that's coming on the way. People who are new and incoming into the Rippaverse want to see what it's all about, might have a little bit of trouble of figuring out what the best place to start, how to start, and I'm here to make this little guideline with having read all these books as where I think would be the best place to start if I was absolutely fresh and new to the Rippaverse. So of course, I am going to start with Isom 1 through 3. So these 3 books make the ill-advised arc, with, of course, the first Isom book being the launching pad of the Rippaverse, and then the other 2 books came out a little bit later. Number 2 came out just under a year, or maybe a little over, actually just under a year later after Isom 1 was fulfilled in October of 22. This was fulfilled in summer of 23. And then Isom number 3 was fulfilled in the early, or actually late spring of this year. And these 3 books make up the ill-advised arc. It's the foundational arc of the Rippaverse. And a lot of people would say, this is where to start. I necessarily wouldn't recommend starting with this. Of course, you can buy the definitive Isom, which collects all 3 of these books. And I think it would be a pretty good place to start, but it's not the absolutely best place to start. While it is a launching pad for the Rippaverse, there are things that happen before the ill-advised arc, and there are more foundational origins that the Rippaverse has that is not covered in Isom. Isom does deal with file like the Great War of Separation, which we'll get to, is mentioned in Isom number 2. But this does introduce a lot of characters. You'll see Alpha Core, you'll see Gooding, you'll see Yaira, you'll see Michael and Lillian. Michael Copper and Lillian Onashi make a very brief appearance in Isom number 1. Of course, you will see Norfolka coming in at the end of the book, right? You see Norfolka right there. So you'll see a whole bunch of characters throughout this ill-advised arc. You'll see Santuan and Shadron. There's a lot of characters. You'll get very familiar. Even Larry Shungite appears in the Isom series. So there's a lot. If you want to just get you dip your toes in, you look at the definitive Isom, it would be a pretty good place to start, but I do think there are better places to start within the Rippaverse than the ill-advised arc, and I am going to go to those right now. And I think if I was going to recommend anybody to get, how should I start with the Rippaverse, would be the Great War of Separation. Now, this is going to be 4 issues in total. The first 2 are available for purchase right now as of December 2025. Number 3 is up for pre-order. I'm not sure if it's closed just yet as of filming this, but if you watch this soon enough or late enough after I release this, you'll probably be able to get all 4 of these either individually or released as one omnibus, which is going to be a really good way to experience this. But this is going to be a 4-parter. The first 2 parts have been really good so far, and this is the foundational arc of one of the foundational stories of the Rippaverse. This really narrates how Texas became its own country within the Rippaverse milieu. So you have this very foundational map, and I mentioned this in my review of the Rippaverse. You can zooming in right there a little bit, and just shows how Texas became its own country in the Rippaverse. So this is one I would really recommend reading. It's a great starting point because it just begins a really awesome story. Of course, Chuck Dixon and Jack Herbert do a phenomenal job, both in terms of Chuck structuring the story and Jack Herbert providing great art for this. Isom does appear in this as well. You do see the beginnings of the Alpha Core, which has a very prominent role in the Rippaverse. So wholeheartedly, I cannot recommend the Great War Separation. As if you're going to start with the Rippaverse, if you're unfamiliar, I would recommend the Great War Separation because it's just such a well-structured story. And then if you like other stuff, then you can go through other things there, and you'll have more context as things go on, especially if you're reading, like I said, Item number 2 and the Great War Separation is mentioned, well, you'll know what they're referring to. Then you'll also know who Brian Solari is, and you'll also know basically have some insight into why Isom has his powers, just a little bit. But anyways, speaking of origins, there are 2 origin stories that we have currently for the Rippaverse. Now, Gooding the Polymath is by Mike Barron and Will Conrad. Will Conrad does the Dokumon cards, which if you can nab any of the decks, I have done all of them on the Braxcast, so you can see me go through the Dokumon cards, each one of the decks on the Braxcast. But Gooding the Polymath is the origin of Cato Gooding, who made his first appearance in Item number 2. He also appears in Bloodroof for a little bit of a spell, and he is a really, really cool character, and this is his true origin. It starts with him as a child, and it ends with him establishing Gooding Services, which is basically the company that he's running in Item number 2, although I won't go anything more than that, getting into spoiler territory, but this is a really good origin story. So if you want a good way to dip your toes in the Rippaverse with a true beginning, then you can certainly get into this. And since this is not that many pages, which is one of when I reviewed it, was like, it's a little bit short. It's a fantastic, way in terms of just like the low investment to get into it. In terms of just like, it's less than $20 to buy this book, and you'll have a fantastic time reading it. And if you like more, you can buy more. And then the other origin story, this one just released, I just reviewed this, is Norfolka. Of course, it's, pre-order was up during the summer, and it just began fulfillment as I'm recording this, or a few weeks before I record this, in November. I'm recording this in December of 2025. In Norfolka, Glorious Death, they make their first appearance in Item number 1, and this limited series, Glorious Death by Eric July and Ronaldson Farrar, if I'm saying that correctly, is a true origin of both of these characters, which is very interesting. So I would actually say that Norfolka Glorious Death is going to be a really good way to get into the Rippaverse. It gets you into the mythological aspects of the Rippaverse. So if you like mythology rather than just hard and fast, grounded superhero stuff, you're going to be right at home with Norfolka. So this would be a fantastic place to start. Now, if you also want something that's a bit more cosmic, we've got Zalen What Kills Must Die. So Zalen What Kills Must Die is done by the powerhouse team at the Rippaverse. This is Chuck Dixon, who wrote The Great War Separation, and he did that with Jack Herbert as the artist, but Joe Bennett is the one he's worked with on Alpha Core, Horseman, and Zalen What Kills Must Die. This is a fantastic book. So Zalen is very much this otherworldly, superpowered character, probably the most superpowered character in the Rippaverse is Zalen. That is the consensus of the fans, and reading this, you'll see why. This definitely would be a good place to start for the Rippaverse. Just if you do start with this book, you're not going to get a lot of insight into the rest of the Rippaverse. He is a character that he gets alluded to just a tiny bit in other Rippaverse content. I won't say where, because I think that's spoilers, but regardless, if you read Zalen and you read upper Rippaverse stuff, you're going to still be finding out a lot. So like I said, if you really like this idea of cosmic, superheroes, of like aliens and stuff like that, I would 100% recommend reading Zalen. It's a fantastic book. It definitely is a really good place to start. Chuck tells a very complete story in this. So you would be hard pressed to, not enjoy this. If you do start with this, just be forewarned that if this is your first Rippaverse book, it's not going to give you much access to what the rest of the Rippaverse is covering. And now next we're going to go into, I think I might as well go into the Horseman. So the Horseman, if I can get all 3 books. So the Horseman has started with Welcome to Flores Park. So Welcome to Flores Park was a 96-page comic book released about, I think 2024, if I'm getting it correctly, which I am. And this was a one-shot, and this one-shot made $800,000 in its collection. So a very popular character, announced at MegaCon in Florida in 2024. So it was announced in February, came out around November or so, if I am remembering correctly. And this is one that has captivated the fans ever since, so much so that Horseman got greenlit for an ongoing series. These first 2 issues carry on from where Welcome to Florist Park ends. So basically, Welcome to Florist Park establishes the character Hector Lee Caparello, if I'm getting his name correctly, as this ex-Army Ranger who is basically living the life of a vigilante as the brutal Horseman. And he does really epic stuff. I mean, this is the Horseman in his full-on costume, and there are just tons and tons of spreads. Alpha Core has a very prominent role in the Horseman, and of course, this is done by Chuck Dixon and Joe Bennett, who do the same character, or who do the Alpha Core as well. So it's just very fitting that the Alpha Core has such a prominent role in the Horseman. And again, you're just treated to so many really epic spreads like that. Just look at spreads like that, because Joe Bennett just knows how to do the art. So Horseman is definitely a very grounded series. It does give you a lot of access to, I wouldn't say the broader Rippaverse, but a decent amount of it. It's a very well-structured story. It's a really fun romp to go through. And I do absolutely think it is one of the best places to start in the Rippaverse if you are going to go ahead and start with the Rippaverse. You can definitely would not go wrong with the Horseman. But like I said, there's stuff that happens before the Horseman that would definitely put you in a better position and understanding more. But Horseman, definitely just from like a pure entertainment aspect, is a great place to start. And you basically are going to start with reading Welcome to Florist Park, and then you go with his ongoing series, because Welcome to Florist Park establishes the character, and the ongoing series just carries on with where he was left off in Welcome to Florist Park, and Chuck Dixon does a very fantastic job at doing that. And then with the last of the projects that Chuck Dixon and Joe Bennett have worked on, it is Alpha Core. So Alpha Core #1 is the first project that wasn't an ISOM book, and it did well. That campaign made about $1.3 million, so very successful. This, of course, was done by Chuck Dixon and Joe Bennett, and this really started their epic collaboration that has really just dominated the Rippaverse. And #2 is on its way. So you don't have a lot of Alpha Core if you're just getting into this, if you're watching this video in December 2025. But hopefully, if you're watching this after the fact, Alpha Core 2, which is taking pre-orders right now, will have released, and then you can get more into the ongoing series. But Alpha Core is definitely the most prominent reoccurring characters. This is Brian Solari, Jeremiah Braxwell, and Ingrid Valdez. They make up this core trio. You see that's Solari, that's Valdez, and that's Braxwell. They make up this core trio of the Alpha Core, and they have a lot of appearances. They appear in Horseman, they appear in ISOM, they appear in, Brian Solari appears in Great War of Separation. So they just are very prominent in the Rippaverse, and it was a bit of like a consolation prize that they make so many appearances in these other books that it took so long for between 1 and 2 coming out. But hopefully the wait between 1 and 2 is not nearly as long for 2 and 3, which I'm hoping is a good thing, or hopefully will be the case, because Alpha Core is definitely going to give readers a lot of insight into the Rippaverse. So if you are watching this like a year and a half, and there's like 3-4 issues of Alpha Core for you to read, I would recommend diving into that series wholeheartedly as being a fantastic place to start. Definitely so with the Alpha Core. So Alpha Core, like I said, they make so many appearances. If you read the Alpha Core series and you read other things, you're going to see these characters pop up a lot, and just going to help you understand the broader Rippaverse. So going into that, there is also Blood Roof #1. I'm going to go with Blood Roof #1 as being a really good book. Gives you insight into some things surrounding ISOM. So I would recommend reading ISOM first, and then maybe Blood Roof, because it gives you a bit more context of things that happen with that character. Of course, I forgot to mention this, Blood Roof is first introduced in ISOM #2. So ISOM #2, like I said, bringing up that point again, is a arc that really introduced a lot. And this includes Sydney Bloodroof, who really is probably one of the more interesting characters in the Rippaverse. She is a Bloodroof, or she is a blood witch. Of course, the Blood Roofs are basically blood witches. She also has this like Christian religious aspect to that as well. It is certainly a little bit, it's very odd for a character. I think the Saskas, who are the writers for this, they do a great job. Michael Montanet is the artist on this, and he does a really fantastic, gritty job on this art. And then, of course, you've got Brett Smith as the colorist, does a fantastic job. He's colored a bunch of other stuff for the Rippaverse, and this is a fantastic book as well. And you do see Gooding and Michael Copper and Lilian Ornashi, who do make appearances in other books. So like I said, you might want to read Isom #1 first and then go for Blood Roof, because you'll be a bit more familiar with some of these characters. Not so much Michael and Lilian. You can read Alpha Core #1, to be honest. You'll get more insight into those characters because they do have a pretty prominent role in Alpha Core #1. And of course, you can read Gooding. But it's not really necessary for you to read all of that. If Blood Roof, you look at it and it just grabs you, it's a fantastic place to start, because as long as you're starting with any #1 in the Rippaverse, you're going to be introduced to a self-contained story that is just going to tie in with the other story. So if Blood Roof grabs you, it's really interesting. If it's not necessarily your cup of tea, you can read the other stuff. And if you're interested by that, then Blood Roof will give you some more context to the Rippaverse, which you can find interesting if you just become a fan of the Rippaverse's lore in general. Blood Roof definitely has some interesting insights into that, not necessarily being the biggest like way to just link everything together. It's more like adds context to the broader Rippaverse. And of course, it's primarily Blood Roof's story, which I think is done really, really well, as I said in my review. And I've reviewed basically all of these books. So next we're going into Yaira. So Yaira is done by the Saska sisters and Deborah Carita. We're 3 issues in so far. #4 has not been announced for pre-order, so you can't pre-order it as of December 2025, but you can get these 3 issues either individually or as part of the definitive Yaira, to my knowledge. That's the Omnibus collection. And this is probably my favorite series in the Rippaverse, my favorite book. These 3 books, they do a fantastic job at introducing the character of Yaira, who is introduced in Isom #1. But this is a fantastic place to start for the Rippaverse, because Yaira's story is just one, extremely interesting, has a lot of really, I'd say supernatural is one thing, but just she is an alien, so it just gives you this very otherworldly view on things that have happened. The Alpha Core, of course, make appearances in Yaira as well. So like I said, reading Alpha Core would probably be a really good place to start, and then reading Yaira or reading anything else, you'll see these characters appear in other books. But Deborah Carita and Jen and Sylvia Saska do a fantastic job. And of course, you've got just so many cool spreads and so much great art. And of course, you've got the Alpha Core making appearances as well. And you do have characters that make appearances in Isom making appearances in Yaira. So you could definitely go ahead and read Isom and then read Yaira. And I think that would actually make the story a little bit more interesting, because Altona, who is Isom's sister, does have a pretty prominent role in Yaira. And you can understand Altona's character more in depth reading Isom than you would in Yaira. And that gives this book a little bit more impact, if you will. But regardless, I think of the order that you read these in, whether you learn about Altona after reading Yaira or before by reading Isom, I think both are really valid ways to go. And this is just a really genuinely entertaining ongoing series so far. And as the issues go on, it's only going to get more entertaining. And these 3 books, if you read these 3 issues, whether in the definitive Yaira or you pick them up separately, they tell a fantastic, very complete story. #2 does have a little bit in terms of pacing issues, but if you're reading 3 right after, you're not really going to deal with that as much as, having to be someone like me who actually bought #2 and then had to wait for #3 to come out. And then last but not least, there are short stories. So there are 5 issues of the Rippazine. Each one of them has a short story. You can basically read them at any point. You've got Salvage Sersha, Salvage Sersha, Dirty Deeds, Dirty Deeds, Catch and Kill. And then the 5th issue of the Rippazine, which has not released yet, is Blue Shift by that is by Andrew, the chief editor of the Rippaverse. But there is a short story collection. I don't have the Rippazines out me to mention, but if you do pick up the Rippazine, you can read any of those short stories, and that's being released as an omnibus, the Rippazine collection, which I think is one to pick up as well. But you do have this anthology, Saints and Sinners. Now, would I start would I start my Rippaverse experience with Saints and Sinners? I wouldn't really say this. It is a good book. I do love Saints and Sinners, but it doesn't really give you any deep lore. Each one of these stories, I think there's about, actually, you got 6 stories in this book, and all of them are quite short, about 15 pages or so. Most of these cover characters that have existed in the Rippaverse before or made appearances, like Chasing Ghosts covers Ingrid Valdez. You've got the underdog carrying Larry Shungite. The Weight of Restraint covers some characters in Isom. And then you've got One Little Push, which does feature Yaira, Darren Fontano, and Altona. And then Bone God is a completely original story with characters that just have never made appearances in the Rippaverse. So all these stories, they are really short. And again, that's also the truth with Across the Bear as well by Jay David or Drunk 3PL. These are all really good. I like all of these. But I wouldn't recommend someone just getting into the Rippaverse to necessarily start with this, because you're not going to get the narrative structures, or you're not going to get the narratives that really give you that lore in the Rippaverse like you would if you read Yaira or Great War Separation or Norfolka or Gooding. So I recommend starting with those longer stories that are dedicated to explaining the origins of certain characters or the origins of certain events, or just the stories of certain characters at the start of the timeline or around the start of the timeline, with that being Isom number 1, where the current timeline of events is ongoing. And basically, whether you're reading Alpha Core, which takes place a little bit before Isom number 1, or Yaira, which basically happens in tandem with Isom number 1, this is not really one that's going to give you that much insight into that. Same thing with like Zalen, but Zalen is at least its own like story, gives you really deep insight into a specific character. This is basically just, it's an anthology. It's a good anthology. I really like this. I wanted to do more Saints and Sinners, but this is one that I would recommend picking up after you've read some of the other books in the Rippaverse, if you like them and you want just a good comic book to enjoy. But that's really it for all of the current books that exist in the Rippaverse. Of course, I do the Braxcast, and this is a Braxcast special episode, so I guess I could have my Braxcast little logo that if you watch the Braxcast, then you know you're very familiar with this. But you can follow me on follow this channel. You can watch the Braxcast, where I cover Rippaverse news, of course, if you want to do that. And you'll learn about stuff like, I've covered like the Detention Crew, which is all ages story that's being released. And that would be probably a decent place to start with the Rippaverse. I just have not read that one yet. And there's constantly content releasing. So general guideline, if you're watching this after the fact and there's some book that I did not mention because I didn't know about its existence yet, if it's a number 1 and it interests you, you can probably be pretty safe in starting with that book. But like I said, I think this is going to be a really good guideline. It's going to hold for a couple of years, I would imagine. So I'm going to release this and then probably not update this for a while, unless like something drastic changes and the entire like foundation of the Rippaverse changes, which I really don't foresee happening for a good little bit. But anyways, that's all I have for you guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Joker is out.
Thank you for tuning in to the Braxcast. Be sure to like, comment, follow, and subscribe to keep up with the Rippaverse.